What is up, Pitt fans? Thank you so much for tuning in. Gonna get going here from the Acrisure Stadium press box after Pitt falls to uh, Florida State, number four Florida State, by a final score of 24-7. You know, there's a like, a lot more to dislike from the Panthers. I thought this was, in general, a pretty positive result. I mean, I'm not on the team. I'm allowed to, not enjoy a moral victory, I guess, but you're allowed to take both the positives and negatives away from a game like that, where like I said, you saw some good things, you saw some bad things, you saw some things that you maybe didn't like, but I think overall, you know, sitting in the press box during that game, watching that kind of unfold and watching it kind of play out, I think the first place my mind went to was last week, where we were last week, where we were at this time, at around 8:30 on a Saturday afternoon, sitting in South Bend after the Panthers had just lost by 51 to a top 15 team. You started to wonder if this was the beginning of the end, if everything was going to kind of unravel from there. This was clearly a team that, I mean, this team is probably still going to finish 2-10. Today did not change that. I don't think you look at them and see anything more, encouraging than maybe you saw, or I don't think you have a different outlook on the season. I'll put it that way after this game as you do after that Notre Dame loss. But Notre Dame, I think, forced people to think more existentially about this coaching staff, this program, where they are in the kind of general scheme in the grand scheme of things, and just where you go from there. After you suffer the biggest loss of your head coach's 9-year tenure, and afterwards he's calling out players in the press conference, and you have players on social media expressing their displeasure with that. Like I said, you start to think more big picture. But after a game like this, where they're really competitive with one of the best teams in the country, where a lot of the young guys that you're kind of watching come in and grow up in front of your eyes, they start to make some plays. The guys who can come back next year, show you some good things. You walk away feeling a little bit differently. I think you see that maybe Pat Narduzzi hasn't completely lost the locker room in the way that a lot of people thought that he had, but also that maybe this team, it can take steps forward still as they kind of close out the year. As you look at the last, well, I guess now it's 3 games. Yeah, 3 games left. Jesus, this season's really flying by. But I think you walk away a little bit more encouraged and less kind of, you know, I wouldn't say dreading the future. I don't think that's what people were doing, but you were just kind of dreading where this program sat, and just if you started to ask yourself if 2-10, if 2023 was going to be the beginning of the end for the Pat Narduzzi tenure, if this was all going to kind of fall apart, and Pitt is going back to maybe looking for a new coach. I don't think 2-10 is 2-10. You can't get around that. And 2-7 right now, 2 wins and 7 losses. Your record is your record. But I think today did a lot to kind of mute some of the bigger, more existential concerns that people had about this team and this program moving forward. I don't think I walk away from this game feeling like Pat Narduzzi is going to end up being on the hot seat by the end of the season, because I think what drove that fear, especially last weekend, was that there seemed to be kind of an open revolt in his locker room. But we really didn't get a chance to ask any of the players this week about those comments and about how they responded to what Pat Narduzzi said. But I think we got an answer on the field today. They played some pretty inspired ball. They were pissed off, and they played that way, and they showed that on the field. So I think encouraging things from the Panthers, just from an effort and a kind of intangible standpoint. There are plenty of tangible things I think that you can latch on to in this game, but the kind of intangible stuff, when they say to us in the post-game press conference that we came into this game pissed off, we wanted to prove ourselves. I think you can kind of discard maybe some of the bigger picture concerns that you had about how Pat Narduzzi was handling this team and how this team was responding to his comments from last week. Pat Narduzzi can tell us that the guys, accepted his apology and moved on, but You never actually know unless you hear it straight from them. But like I said, I feel like we got an answer from them in this game. Getting into more of the kind of nuts and bolts of what happened on the field at Acrisure Stadium, I think there are, like I said, some things to be encouraged by. So we'll start there. I mean, the defense I thought played a lot better than some of the numbers will kind of lead you to believe. I'm looking at them right now, especially in the total team stats. I mean, they gave up 500 yards and 24 points. 363 through the air, 138 on the ground. Not exactly, average of 6.8 yards per play. Doesn't look very good on paper, but I think when you will actually go through, look at the film or whatever, and look at what the play-by-play and the down-to-down play of the defense, I think you can be really encouraged. They were fantastic in the first half. I mean, forcing a fumble, I believe the first drive, as the Seminoles were really driving into Pitt territory, they were threatening to score. It looked like they were getting things pretty easily, even without those top two receivers, Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman. But they come up with a big stop, and they continued to do that on third downs and deep in their own territory. They had a big fourth down stop in the red zone to give the offense the ball back. I think overall, just they played much better than I think a lot of these stats will tell you. I mean, especially in the first half. I mean, held them to 10 points in the first half. 231 yards passing, but only 66 yards rushing, which I swear I really thought that where things could fall apart for this team. That all of that stuff was encouraging as well. Brandon George had a great game. I know that's not necessarily an older guy, but tied the team leading tackles with seven. Had the most solo tackles on the team with 7. He had 2.5 tackles for loss, all of them like big plays. But we'll get into this with the offense too. It's the penalties that really killed them. I believe they had 3 defensive penalties for 31 yards. That's not counting an equipment violation on a punt. For Phil Dracovic getting in there on punt team coverage for the first time this season. He, you can see why that's still a work in progress, because the Panthers had 2 number 5s on the field. I believe he and PJ O'Brien were on the field at the same time on that play. But there were, I believe, 2 pass interference calls on Marquez Williams. Oh, I think he had. This is interesting. I'm looking at the penalties part of the live stats feed, and I'm pretty sure that Marquez Williams had a pass interference and a holding maybe in this game, but they're not listing them. Maybe I'll refresh it. So I think they did have 4 penalties actually, maybe for more yards than that. But either way, some penalties were killer, but I felt like overall it was a really strong performance against a really good offense. I think Pitt acquitted themselves really well. I mean, Javon McIntyre and PJ O'Brien, while they didn't look like the guys that I thought they were going to be, earlier in the season, they have definitely stepped up their play. They've been much better at coverage. They're much better, finding fits in the run game. I feel like they are top to bottom better than they were to start this year. The play of the defensive line has definitely taken a step forward as well. They not only did really well against the run, I thought, but stepped up to make some big plays, pass rushing, and finally, they're starting to affect quarterbacks more, I feel like, than they were at the beginning of the year. I think even going back to the Notre Dame game and the Wake Forest games, and definitely the Louisville game, that you can see that play out on the field, that these guys definitely do have guys who can disrupt the passer now. And then, obviously Brandon George is great. Shane Simon continues to be one of, if not the, he's definitely their best player on defense, I'd venture to say. But 11 tackles for loss, 5 pass breakups, 3 hits on Jordan Travis. The forced fumble, of course, was big too. I think you walk away pretty encouraged seeing what these guys have been able to do, against a team like that. And then even, in the Notre Dame game, I thought they played pretty well in that one too. And to a certain extent, you have to put a little bit of blame on the offense for, not being able to stay on the field, because it's clear. I mean, I said at the end of the first half, but just that it didn't seem like Florida State was able to wear them down in the way that I thought they would. But things clearly kind of, the floodgates definitely kind of opened up in the second half, and you could feel, I think they hit, maybe a 20-yard pass or something Florida State did on their first drive after halftime, and that's when you kind of started to feel things turn. you started to sense that a dam was going to break, that the Panthers weren't going to be able to hold on for much longer, and that's kind of what ended up happening. Time of possession was only, let me look it up. It was only 35, 36, thereabouts to 25, give or take. Yeah, excuse me, 35 to 25 in terms of minutes in favor of Florida State, but it felt like a lot more. It felt like the Pitt defense was on the field so much more than the Florida State offense was, or than the Florida State defense was. I mean, even the play disparity was, I think Florida State ran 14 more plays than Pitt did. You could just kind of sense it that they were just getting worn down, and some of the big plays that Florida State had in the second half really reflected that. I mean, in the third quarter, from the third quarter on, I think they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 passes of 15 yards or more, and then they had 2 runs of 20 yards or more in the second half. And you could just see, I mean, that long touchdown, that 55-yard touchdown run, Pat Narduzzis said he was upset with that. But, I mean, by that point, it was pretty late in the third quarter, and you could just sense that this defense was pretty exhausted and were trying to do anything they could to keep a lid on it. But, when the offense, only gives you 7 points to work with, there's not much you can do there. I think we're going to move over to the offense a little bit. And I've said before, I've been really encouraged. I think Christian Veer looked like, a quarterback of the future, a guy that this team could really believe in and ride with moving into 2024. But, it's not I wouldn't say it's not looking that way, actually. I don't think that's the right phrasing. But I do think that I'm less sold on Christian Veer as quarterback of the future, automatically going into next season as I was before this game, or even before the Notre Dame game. I think Nate Yarnell's got to get at least a chance down the stretch here. And I mean, it's a little unfair, I think, to maybe judge Veer off of the past 4 weeks in which he's played, or the last 4 weeks. So he's been a starter. This was his 4th start. He's been a starter for a month. Those are his first 4 career starts, but also they came against 3 top 25 opponents, and then a road game at Wake Forest. Like, that's a tough situation. That's a tough situation for anyone. But man, he hasn't gotten significantly more accurate. Even in the I think he's still. You look at the numbers. I mean, he's looking a lot. The numbers are starting to look startlingly similar to Phil Dracovich's numbers before he got benched. I mean, Veer entering this game was only at 52% completion rate, and he fell under 50%. In this game, he was 13 of 35, 244 yards, a touchdown, and interception. He's 43% today. He's thrown for, he's played 5 games, the exact same number as Jurkovec. His yards per attempt is lower than Jurkovic's. He's thrown more interceptions now. He's thrown 7 interceptions to 6 touchdowns after today's game. I mean, that was one of the biggest problems with Jurkovec was, he was just throwing the ball up and he was being careless with it. And Veer for a while looked like he addressed that problem, and like he got the offense back to a point where they could feel safe with him having the ball in his hands. But that didn't end up being the case. That hasn't held through these last few games. So that's a big problem. You can't be throwing interceptions like that. For a team like this, for an offense like this, the biggest killer that you can possibly have is not being able to take care of the ball and just giving away possessions like that. So I think, I'm not all the way out on him. Obviously, there are some extenuating circumstances that make his job a little bit harder, but he's got to be better than he has been right now, and that he has been over these past couple weeks. Even considering the competition, there are things that he just, he's air milling throws that he should be able to make. The accuracy has been a huge problem. So, if he can get that back on track, maybe you start to feel a little bit better. But I still think that Nate Yarnell deserves at least a game or 2 or some snaps to maybe prove that he should be in that conversation for a starting job next year and moving forward. I think he deserves just about just as good a chance as Veer heading into next season. I think you got to actually, have a real quarterback competition. And if we're starting to think about next year at a couple of different other positions, I don't know why quarterback would be exempt from that discussion as well. I also think on offense, it was weird how little they ran the ball, how much they wanted to put this game on Christian Veer's shoulders. Rodney Hammond ran the ball really well, 13 attempts for 60 yards, but as a team, they ran it just 24 times compared to 36. Pass attempts for Veer. I thought that was pretty weird. Just because, well, like Rodney was running well, and I thought that in a game like that where it was close for most of the game, it was with it. It's not like they went down, 17-0 at halftime like they did against Florida Notre Dame. Excuse me. They had plenty of opportunities to stay in that game and to keep it competitive and to use the run game to kind of control the clock and keep things more in control, especially considering the fact. I mean, and also they probably would have given them the best chance of scoring, but they continued to mix running backs. They didn't give Rodney Hammond the ball as much as I thought they should have, and they didn't even just turn to the run as often as I thought they would. It seemed like early in the third quarter that they had a chance to get Hammond going and get him hot, but they just didn't really take full advantage of it. On every big down, they turned to Veer. They put the ball in his hands instead of letting Rodney keep them on schedule and let him keep them in the game. I thought the running back rotation has been weird all year, but as of late, I've kind of thought Hammond, even with the opportunities given, hasn't been particularly spectacular, but today he was great. He was really good. He ran hard. He got yards after contact. He found open holes. I thought he used his speed well too, which is not something that we've seen, but I truly don't think he got enough chances. And then, I mean, Gavin Bartholomew too. I mean, he finally got targeted, but he caught did get targeted 6 times actually. But he only caught one of those passes. I mean, he did have a big drop too. Just the usage of Bartholomew, I'm glad they're at least trying to get him a little more involved. But again, that goes back to Veer needing to put the ball on him and to be a little bit more accurate. I thought the pass catchers have been generally pretty reliable when given opportunities, but today I feel like called for a different script, and I felt like he should, Frank Signetti should be able to read what the situation of the game is and be able to, I don't know, have a better read on what they're doing, what they need and what they're good at on a certain night or in a certain game. And today I felt like the running game deserved a little bit more than the attention that it got from Mr. Signetti. And I mean, even I thought Sibo Flemister wasn't fantastic, but even he ran 4.6 yards a rush. Daniel Carter even had a couple runs, averaging 13 yards a carry. I mean, as a team, sack adjusted, they ran for 110 yards on 21 attempts. I mean, that's north of 5 yards a carry. I mean, I think they're starting to figure a few things out there in that running game, but it needs to be given the opportunity to flourish. And especially, in a game like this, I thought they could have continued to run the ball and stayed in this game. That's the thing. That's what baffled me, is that they were never really so out of this game that they couldn't afford to continue to run the ball. A couple other kind of helmet sticker types things. Brandon George, I mentioned him. He played a great game. He was really crucial just on so many of those big downs when they were able to stop Florida State on third downs. Florida State only 5 of 14. There was a stretch where I think they didn't convert on maybe 6 or 7 third downs in a row. It was a really nice stretch. I mean, I think they got one at the end, at the very beginning of the game on their first drive, and then didn't get one again until the very end of the third quarter. But Pitt also did go 0 for 10 on their third downs. That's something I forgot to mention in the offense. That you're not really going to win games doing that. But speaking of failing to convert on third downs, I thought Caleb Junko also had a pretty good game. I mean, he got fairly lucky on some nice rolls, but averaged 42 yards a kick, had a 55-yarder. 3 of his 9 kicks landed inside the 20. 2 of his kicks went for 50 or more yards. He had to punt a lot today, and he was pretty successful doing that. It was a nice bounce back for him. I also am starting to get even more impressed with Dejon Reynolds. I got to be honest, I thought he was going to be kind of nothing for the Panthers coming into this season. I thought, he was named a starter and has stayed a starter throughout the entire year, but I didn't really see it with him. But he's been pretty good over his past 3 games. including this one. He's got 12 catches for, do some quick math on the fly, for 124 yards. That's pretty good. Like if you can get that from your third or arguably your fourth wide receiver, that's awesome, and you can definitely work with that. So, a couple positive things to take away from this game. I mean, I think we all kind of knew that the result might have been predetermined going into this one, but Pitt was much more competitive than I think many of us thought they'd be. And while it was a disappointing result, there are plenty of good things to take away from this game. But with that, I'm going to head out of here. Thank you all for tuning in to another Inside Pitt postgame report. Appreciate you spending some tonight with me and breaking down this game, this loss for Pitt. We'll have some more reporting for you tomorrow, Sunday morning, from this game, some more lingering thoughts and more breakdowns of, kind of a complicated game for the Panthers. So appreciate you all tuning in, like I said, and I'll see you next time.